Okay guys, tonight we're going to look at what happened after the war. So we've asked this question before, was the Great War good for business? And as we've said, it may be a surprise, but the answer is yes. As you know, governments need things during the war. People who produce things, like farmers or factory owners, are able to sell all of their things to the government. Further, the government would help these producers with lower taxes. With factories as part of the total war idea, car companies, for example, would not make cars during the war. Instead, they would make things like tanks or airplanes. And so the government bought all of these things that these factories could make. So what happens after the Great War ends? Well, for the first thing, the governments no longer need these items. Thus, as they stop buying them, these farmers and factories no longer have their best customer. What this means by losing their best customer is that now they have more things than they can sell, meaning overproduction. As you know, when you have too many things that you've made that you cannot sell, it means you have to fire your employees. Now, employees who no longer have a job obviously do not have a paycheck, so they cannot go out and buy things, meaning more people will lose their jobs because there's a lower demand. For example, pretend that you work at a bicycle factory. If there is less demand for bicycles, there's a good chance you lose your job. If you lose your job, you lose your paycheck. So you can't afford to go and buy something like an oven. If I work at an oven factory and less people are buying ovens, then that lowers demand, meaning I lose my job, meaning I lose my paycheck, meaning I have less money to go buy other things. Another category of bad for factory owners and farmers is that a lot of these people took out loans during the Great War to buy new machinery that would allow them to be more efficient and produce more things. A lot of these people put up collateral, such as their homes or their land, in order to get this loan. As you know, machinery is expensive, and after the war ends, it's very hard for them to pay back the bank, and so a lot of them would lose their businesses or their homes or their land. Now, what makes this even more complicated is something called the International Loan Diamond. Now, you can see right here the United States, right here you can see France, right here you see the United Kingdom, and then right here you see Germany. So these are the four countries we're focusing on. During the war, the U.S. will help the United Kingdom and France as its main allies, and it will lend these two countries $10 billion. In today's money, that's $135 billion. So after the war, the United Kingdom and France have to pay the USA back. However, they can't do so unless Germany pays their reparations, the payments that Germany owes to the winning countries. So as you can see right here, Germany paying the United Kingdom and France and the United States back is key for the United Kingdom and France to pay the United States back for these loan payments. As you can see, all of this makes a diamond. What this means is that these countries are now all dependent upon one another to be successful. The term for this is interdependence. Now think about this. Do you think this is a good or a bad thing? After the Great War, how could interdependence be a good thing in that all of these countries are all depending upon each other to be successful? How could this be a bad thing? So now let's shift to the United States after the Great War. Now, as you know, this is a time period of optimism and entertainment and confidence in the U.S. A time of cheer and excitement, as the screen says, and this is called the Roaring Twenties. Now further, all of these new technologies and entertainment forms during this time are making this a good time, okay? Dancing becomes very popular. This is the jazz age. Automobiles are more and more frequent. Electricity is seen more often. New things are sold that haven't been sold before. A lot of appliances, for example, like a washing machine, an icebox, what they call a refrigerator, radios, okay? So again, this is just a time of excitement. And there's no way that I could say this any better than by showing you the very beginning of the preview for the most recent version of the movie, The Great Gatsby.
New York, 1922. The tempo of the city had changed sharply. The buildings were higher. The parties were bigger. The morals were looser and the liquor was cheaper. The restlessness approached hysteria.
Shall we?
Who is this Gatsby?
Do you know him?
War hero.
Mr. Gatsby doesn't exist.
Gatsby? What Gatsby?
I beg your pardon. Mr. Gatsby would like to speak to you. Alone.
So as we said, business is booming during this time period. More people are buying consumer products than ever before. Now, time to be Debbie Downer. Wah, wah. Now, while it's true that the United States is selling more consumer products than ever before, the dangerous fact here is that most people, most ordinary people, like me, for example, are buying these products either on credit or through installment plans, meaning they didn't have the money to buy these things outright. So on credit, meaning that they are basically buying now and paying later. An installment plan is where you pay a little bit every month for something. So basically, this is this new consumer age when everyone wanted to keep up with the peer pressure of owning things. There's this concept of a standard of living in the United States, and no one wanted to be seen as falling behind. The danger when buying with credit or through an installment plan is that when time gets tough, especially when the economy goes down, a lot of times people cannot afford to pay for these items. So the stock market is a popular way to make money, where you buy or sell shares of a company. Before the Great War, only the richest people in the United States were able to invest in the stock market. That's also the case after the war, except after the war, ordinary people like me will buy a lot of shares in a company, for example, Apple Computer, but someone like me can't afford to buy a lot of shares in that company, so we take out a loan. And so this is where a stockbroker would loan me money to buy shares. The problem here is that since I only paid about 10% of the stock price and the stockbroker paid the other 90%, from the outside, it looks like the United States stock market is really strong and ordinary people like me are able to buy lots and lots of shares in a company. So the economy looked really strong. The reality is that since the stock market was not regulated by the government, it was simply a lie. Now, the way I would pay my stockbroker back for this loan is when Apple made a lot of money and I sold my shares, then I would just pay back the stockbroker plus interest. The problem is, for that to work, the stock price has to go up. So what happens if that doesn't happen? So what happens if the stock market doesn't improve? What happens if shares do not become more valuable? If stock prices actually go down and the stock market crashes, then everyone loses everything. I lose my investments. The stockbroker will lose his loan. He will not be repaid because I can't repay him. And banks who invest people's money when people make savings accounts in the banks are losing people's money. The people I really feel bad for are ordinary people like farmers who trust a bank and put their money in a bank. And then one day they walk to the bank to make a deposit and the bank is simply closed because all the money inside is no longer there. The bank takes that money and invests it to make money itself, and when the stock market crashed, and since the bank had invested in stocks, they've lost everybody's money. And there's nothing legally that can be done to get that money back. Today there is, but in 1929 there wasn't. So as I just mentioned, 1929 is the worst year, and October 29 is when everything goes bad. This is called Black Thursday. Taking most of the blame for this, the U.S. president, who's not necessarily a bad guy, he just sort of inherited a huge problem, Herbert Hoover, really was blamed because he didn't do anything to correct this problem. Maybe he thought that it would correct itself because he was very conservative and he felt that the market is best left alone, what is called laissez-faire. So what we're looking at here is basically the perfect storm. As we've talked about, you have all of these bad effects after the war for economies in countries like the United States. Now you have a major stock market in a major country that has failed, and then thanks to interdependence, all of these countries who have invested in the U.S. or that the United States has invested in, like the United Kingdom or Germany or France, now the Great Depression will visit them. So as I said, everyone blamed President Herbert Hoover for not preventing this from happening. What you're looking at is what's called a Hooverville. This is an unemployed area where people had lost their homes and they live in these shacks. This is in Seattle, Washington. This is one of the better pictures of the Great Depression era. Look at the sign behind these people promising how great things are in the United States. These people are all standing in line to get food. In this picture, we can see simply how high the unemployment rate is going and how people simply can't find jobs. And this is a free soup, coffee, and donut shop that is giving these things to people who are unemployed. Don't ask me how this company made any money. I don't know, but it shows great generosity in this time of terrible depression. So what actually happens during a Great Depression? Well, the biggest thing is that unemployment goes up. At 25% is where it maxes out. As we talked about, banks fail. They close and they take people's money with them. Some banks that stay open simply don't loan any money out because they don't have a lot of money to loan. Now this is really bad because this means less money is in circulation. And if that happens, it means that prices of items go down, meaning businesses lose money, meaning unemployment goes up. So there's really no good cycle here during the Great Depression. And as you can imagine, this is taking place all over the world. For one of the reasons, countries like the United States want Americans to buy American products. And so it really cuts down on global trading and global production. So if you're the United States president, what do you do right now? How do you fix this problem? Good luck.